Safety first, guys. Think safety, work safely. All right, so we're back on the 02 Discovery, back at Jack's Disco Shop. This truck has a squeaking noise when you drive it real slow, and it also has a vibration. You can feel it in the seat, like between 15 and 35 miles an hour. And that's typically the front drive shaft is failing. The AC drains drain right on top of the drive shaft, right on top of the U-joints. There's no grease fittings on them, and they fail. They get rust in them and they fail. If you don't replace the drive shaft and it breaks while you're driving, it'll break, it'll spin around and put a hole inside of your transmission, and then you'll have to replace the transmission and the drive shaft. Drive shafts on these cars are pretty expensive for the right part. It's made by GKN. That's the only one that I found that is good. That's the actual OE maker of them. So that's the one I would recommend getting. So we got one here on the bench. We're gonna pop this one off and then put a new one in. They're pretty easy to take off. You're gonna need a 9/16 socket, universal drive socket, and an extension, and a 9/16 wrench. 3/8 impact works really well. You can do it with two 9/16 wrenches if you had to, but it'll just take you a little bit longer. And then I also have this special 9/16 drive shaft socket that works good. Just keep in mind, if you're working on this truck and you're trying to do a drive shaft, that drive shaft will not spin whether the car is in neutral or not with all the wheels on the ground. You have to jack up all four wheels and put it on jack stands to get the drive shaft to spin. Otherwise, you'll have to figure something else out. So this drive shaft is in pretty bad shape. We'll go ahead and get her taken off and show you on the bench. Right now the nut is stuck in the socket. So just gotta put it back on there a little bit. And I usually alternate from the transfer case side to the differential side, just so I have to spin the drive shaft less. On the transfer case side, you don't have to hold the bolt. On the front diff side, you have to do the nut and the bolt. There's gonna be 4 bolts on the differential and 4 on the transfer case side. Just gonna knock them all off. That's you get one of the front bolts out. We'll just use that to pop the nuts out. And it's easiest to use your wrench, put it on one of the nuts on the front drive shaft, and then you can spin it. Rotate the whole shaft around. It's a pretty easy job. A little bit harder without a lift or without the wheels off the ground, but it's doable. I've done it. The hardest part is just buying the drive shaft, because it's about an $800 part. You can rebuild them. You can buy new U-joints, and there's and do it yourself. It takes a little bit of skill and patience, but you can do it. So we got the drive shaft off. So this one is very obviously bad. I can rotate it like this. It's very notchy, and you can actually see the drive shaft needle bearings on that U-joint. They're exposed. They're rusty. This one has a side play like that. So if you weren't sure if your shaft was bad and you got it on the bench, and you could investigate it like that. It's very, very tight, very rusty. The cap is broke. You see that rust like that. That's a very common sign of the U-joint failing and rust coming out of them. So they are a pain to rebuild yourself. It definitely takes 2 sets of hands to do it, to set that back up. So I generally don't do that anymore. So this is the new GKN drive shaft. This one has some grease fittings on it, and which I've actually not seen that before. So we're going to put new nuts on there because they are lock nuts. So you want to get, it's a 3/8, 24 threads per inch nut, lock nut, grade 8. That's what you want to replace them with. So we got new nuts, new drive shaft. Goes on 2 ways. It can be 180 out or 90 degrees out. But you can generally see where the rust mark is on there and just put it back on the same way. Slide it on there. Get a couple nuts started. Put your bolts in. Bolts go from the back of the car to the front. Goes through the drive shaft first. If your car has center diff lock, the 02s don't. The 99s did, the 04s did, and some of the 2000s did. And you have a bad drive shaft, you can take your drive shaft out and put your truck in diff lock. You drive it around without a drive shaft for temporary time, get you home or whatever. It's not really recommended to do that, but it can be done. Otherwise, if this particular car doesn't have a center diff lock, so you can, it's not even an option. If you take your front drive shaft out and try to drive, you just won't go anywhere. These cars are full-time, 4-wheel drive. So without a front drive shaft, it won't move. It'll just spin that shaft. All right. So we're now ready to tighten them down. We're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna tighten one and the other side. Over here. Spin it around. You know, make these good and tight. And I'm looking at it too to make sure my flanges are lined up straight. They're not cocked or crooked or binding or anything. So that's all 4 on each side. And I like to go back to the first one I did and just make sure that one got fully seated on both sides. And that's it. Since this one does have grease fittings on it, we'll go ahead and give them a shot of grease. They should be fully greased already, but we'll just give them a couple of pumps and wipe your grease off so you don't make too much of a mess. Wasn't able to get on this one. I'm going to have to get a different adapter for that one. And they have one more grease fitting on that slide joint there. Get that little grease. That's it. I'll give it a road test, make sure it's good. That's it. That's how you replace your front drive shaft. The end. Thanks for watching Jack's Disco Shop. Remember, think safety, work safely.